Are you overwhelmed by the challenge of personalizing communication for thousands of students? That's where Element 451's AI assistants come in. From nudging prospective students to guiding those already on their journey, AI assistants don't just automate. They write, build, and optimize every step of your digital campaigns. Discover how at element451.com/AI team.
Welcome to Mastering the Next, a cutting-edge podcast that explores the future of graduate, online, and non-traditional education through the lens of AI and technology. I'm your host, Dr. Ray Lutsky, Vice President of Strategic Partnerships at Element 451. Join me for discussions with some of the thought leaders shaping the future of graduate enrollment management through technology. Mastering the Next is a part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher education professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform that helps institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. Today we're joined by Dr. Aric Krause, Dean of Academic and Administrative Affairs at Rensselaer at Work, the online and professional education arm of Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. Traditional selling points for higher ed, like small class sizes, no longer resonate strongly with modern learners, and institutions must innovate to stay relevant, particularly for working professionals and adult students. Dr. Krause will help us explore what's next for higher education as it redefines its value proposition in an evolving landscape. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Krause.
Thank you, Ray.
This is a particularly special episode for me as a two-time alumnus of Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, so I'm really, really glad to have you here. What's next for higher education as it redefines its value proposition, particularly given the changes to what we may have long considered the idea of a traditional student?
That's an outstanding question. It comes from this idea that any industry is going to evolve over time. All industries evolve over time, and higher ed is evolving as we speak. It's interesting to think about 30 years ago, getting a degree or getting higher education was just something that people aspired to do, aspired to get that move forward economically and socially through education. Well, to your point, in the last 5 to 10 years, whether or not that's an actual value proposition has sort of entered people's minds. In a sense, you can compare it to the old story of the emperor who was wearing no clothes. People are starting to think that higher ed may not be wearing clothes. Whether or not that's true is immaterial. If it's the perception of the market, that becomes a problem. What higher ed needs to do in all of its programs, in all levels, is make clear what the value proposition is, if there's a value proposition. For example, when you think of an undergraduate student, campuses are quick to market those beautiful climbing walls and swimming pools and beautiful dorms. Great. However, 50% or more of the decision of where an undergraduate, a traditional undergraduate student will go is made by the parent. What's the value proposition for the parent? Well, to be honest, it's pretty straightforward. It's whether or not their child will launch successfully into life. So if the university isn't describing to that more than 50% of the decision makers that their university and that program will launch their students and their sons and daughters and children into a successful career, a successful life, then they haven't demonstrated value. They've demonstrated it to maybe the young person themselves, but not to the parents who make more than 50% of the decision. That's our burden. We have to prove that we have value, whether or not it's undergrad or graduate. We have to show value. The market's demanding it.
That's interesting to think about how passé some of these claims seem now, how generic. And I'm curious, kind of drilling down to your work at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, with Rensselaer at Work specifically. What strategies are you employing to craft a more value-laden set of messages to cut through the clutter and to resonate with influencers, with the learner, with their employers, the folks that are going to help them make those decisions?
Rensselaer at Work has a series of graduate programs for individuals who are in their professional career. So there's a young engineer or an accountant or a scientist. They're 5 years in. They realize that they want to get that next promotion, but they know they need some more education. Rensselaer at Work has programs that can be taken anytime, anywhere, and get the ability sets that are needed to move that individual forward in their career path. I used the term just now, ability sets, because that's what our strategy is. When we think about that professional, that young person who is aspiring into a career, we keep exactly that in mind, that they have an aspiration. What's their pain point, really? Their pain point is they're in a job. Maybe they've sort of reached the point where they've decided they either need to get a promotion or move to a new employer. So we need to address that very pain point and show that our programs will give them the room that they need or the ability sets that they need to move forward. So we've worked very closely with employers to find out precisely what they're looking for, what ability sets their company needs more of, what they expect for their rising stars to get those promotions. And we've built programs to directly deliver those ability sets. In one sense, we sort of see it. You mentioned employers and professionals. We see both of them as important to what we do. We need to help that professional achieve their next career step, their career aspiration. And we need to help that employer build its talent, retain its rising stars, and move the organization forward more effectively. So we've designed programs that are at the nexus of both of those needs, the individual's career aspirations and the company's need to build talent. That's where our programs sit, and they sit directly in that nexus. Not only do they sit directly in that nexus, but we use what we call a project-based approach, where quite often in higher ed, you see maybe the focus is quite often on retention and memorization. Well, we use a project-based approach that helps our students not only learn things, but be able to do them, to get the experience of using what they're learning so that they can go back to the organization and show, look, I not only know a whole bunch, I can do a whole bunch. That's how we provide and prove value to not only that individual working professional, but also their employer.
I want to stick with that for a second because workforce education and working with employers has become an area of increased focus over the last couple of years, certainly something Rensselaer at Work has been doing for decades. How do you go about tailoring your messaging to address those specific needs and some of the pain points you mentioned for employers? I'm curious just to know what role the employer is playing there, how they're supporting those learners, and even if you could share some specific examples of how you've been working with employers to address those pain points, I'd love to know.
Let me give you a quick example. Data analytics. For the last several years, we hear that word everywhere. Well, companies kept telling us, we would ask employers, we would say, what are those areas where you wish your organization had more talent? And everybody would say data analytics, data analytics. Now, I believe most people, most universities would take that and run back and build a program in data analytics. That would be the first reaction. That's not what we did. We asked people, we drilled down on that question. Okay, you say you need data analytics. What precisely do you need? And here's what employers told us. They told us they've been investing billions of dollars over the last 15 years in data infrastructure. data warehouses, systems, CNC machines on the production floor that talk to each other and generate data. They've been building all this infrastructure to generate and capture that data. But that data is worthless if the individual who's making decisions for the organization doesn't have that data at their fingertips to augment the decisions that they're making. In other words, anybody who's in charge in that organization of budgets or people or projects or products needs to have the intelligence that's buried in that data at their fingertips so that when they make decisions about people, products, projects, and budgets, they have that data and they make the most correct decision possible, as opposed to making decisions on, well, this is the way we did it before, hunch, anecdote, historical precedent. No. So all of that data investment is worthless if the individual making the decision isn't fluent in using data in their decision-making process. So all those conversations, when employers would say to us, data analytics, we would say, but what does that really mean? And we drilled down and had hundreds of conversations. And what we found was that I just said. What they want are decision makers who are fluent in using data so that the likelihood of making the best decision possible is improved. So what we teach is not just this weird wide field of data analytics. We teach how to use data visualization, statistical tools, various software packages to make decisions, not data analytics as a standalone, but data analytics as a decision support and augmentation mechanism. So that's what we do. That's how we get down to the heart of the matter and really build curriculum that's unique, that's very focused. And we can show that very focusedness back to the employer as we come back to them a year, 6 months later and say, okay, you told us this. Here's the program we built. What do you think? I'll just simply close that by saying, we don't just build a program, put it out in production and let it go. We diligently and in a dedicated manner review it every 2 years by going back out and talk to employers, professionals, experts in the field, and we say, how is this evolving? How is this evolving? And we use that as a constant updating of the program so that we know we're delivering professionals who have exactly the ability sets that employers are looking for.
Clearly, you're curating some really skills-oriented experiences that are going to improve the life of the learner as much as the productivity of the employer in achieving their goals, whether it's retaining someone who's high potential or upskilling or reskilling them in a way that helps advance their career and also the needs of the organization. But I can imagine that a lot of this requires a very sophisticated communication strategy in order to get that word out that you're doing all these innovative things and cut through that noise. So I'm curious how Rensselaer at Work is leveraging technology tools, anything from some schools are using geofencing or machine learning or artificial intelligence to more effectively reach potential students and employers. Just curious what you're doing at Rensselaer at Work.
We are practicing what we preach to get our word out to employers and professionals. And by that, I mean data analytics, which I just talked about. We're able to determine what factors are most important in determining whether or not someone is ready for graduate school. For example, how long they've been employed in their career, where they're living, what their family situation is. Apparently, when professionals take on familial responsibilities, they start to feel the pressure and they get a little bit more serious about their career path. So there are a series of metrics that we've been able to learn using and deploying what we preach, data analytics, machine learning. And so what we're able to do then is identify professionals across the country who have those traits, who are in, at say 5 to 7 years into their career and, have familial obligations. We're able to use various data techniques to find those individuals wherever they are and present them with what our programs are about and what our methodology is about and what our value proposition is so that they can make the decision that's best for them. So we're practicing what we preach. We're also using digital tools to get our word out to employers. For example, we heavily use LinkedIn and the networks that we have in LinkedIn and our alumni network and our professional networks. We've built networks over time and we get that message out. It is sometimes a challenge to help people understand how our programs are more focused on their success as opposed to just a general program that someone might be offering. Sometimes that message is hard to convey, but if we can get it to the right person at the right moment, right when they're starting to feel that pain of, I need a promotion, I need to move up, when we can get our message out and our value proposition to them at that moment in that place, that's when we're successful.
I want to double click on that for a second, Aric, because it reminds me of a conversation we had before. And I know that President Marty Schmidt of Rensselaer is very focused on the idea of quantum computing. This is something that's really leading edge out there. And I can imagine for some learners and employers, they don't even necessarily understand what that means. So I know you're developing a program around this. How are you articulating the value proposition, just for example, for a program that really is going to mean success for a lot of folks in the future, but maybe they don't quite know what that success looks like yet?
Quantum computing is such a great example. Let me step back, though, for 10 seconds before I tell you about that. When we were talking with employers, and as we continue to talk with employers, one of the things that we learned was that the amount of education that anybody needs at any given time is unique to them. 10, 15 years ago, you had a choice of get a degree. That was it. You can get a degree. 30 credit hours. As a working professional, it might take you 2.5 years, 3 years, 30, 40 credit hours, whatever it is. It might take you 2-3 years, but not everybody needs a whole degree. So we've transformed our entire programs, set of programs, our portfolio to be differently sized. We are, instead of thinking about the unit of a degree, we're thinking of units of ability sets. So you need that fluency in data analytics that we talked about. Well, that's, 3 or 4 courses. Let's put a certificate, a real certificate together and give you that and offer it to you in the chunks that you need, right? When you need it, wherever you are. And all of those chunks are stackable into degrees, but the point is get what you need when you need it. One of the ways that we do that is employers have told us consistently about certain abilities that their employees need, their working professionals need, that aren't a course. They're smaller than a course, like the ability to negotiate, for example. We hear that all the time. That's not a whole course. So we've even built a platform where we can offer smaller than courses. That's what we're doing with quantum. Quantum computing right now is still an unknown. The technology is coming to fruition. There's a couple of companies out there, some of whom are partners with us, that are just really bringing the technology into into a reality. But how that will get used, how that will influence business in the future is still to be determined. It's very early days. So what we are able to do is, in a smaller than a course, in whatever the right increment is, build a course that helps leaders start to think about, okay, there's this thing called quantum coming. How can you as a leader in your organization start to think early, way ahead, of how that is going to influence what you do and how you do it today, so that you can start thinking about it today, even as it evolves over the next 5 to 10 years. So we've built this. So we've disaggregated. I love that word, disaggregated education into any size, anytime, anywhere. It all counts. Take what you need when you need it. Move yourself forward as fast as you can. That's the value proposition of what we are offering. And that's how we're going to address quantum.
Sticking with technology and the role of new technologies, I'm curious to have your perspective on the role of artificial intelligence here, not just as a discipline of study, but as a means of demonstrating the value proposition, cutting through the noise, getting to the prospective students and employers that you want to reach. What opportunities or limitations do you currently see in the use of artificial intelligence in this context?
I have to start with a caveat to that answer. I am a science fiction nerd. So I think of Isaac Asimov's definition of artificial intelligence, and I can't help but think about whether or not what we have today, for example, the evolving generative type of AI, is really true artificial intelligence. Well, it's on the path. Let's put that to bed. It's on the path. But I do have that slight bias. One of the things about the generative AIs that we have today are they've been trained with trillions of data points. But if you ask it, it can derive the fact that the sky contains air. It can draw that conclusion from the trillions of data points that were used to train it. But if you ask it, well, what kind of air, or is the air good? It can't make that quantitative or qualitative leap. It doesn't even know what air is. It knows the word air. It knows that it's spelled AIR. It knows that it quite often is associated with sky, but it has no idea what a sky is or what air actually is. So today's artificial intelligence are early. They're evolving very rapidly, but they're not incredibly smart. In fact, they're not incredibly wise. Let me use that word. They're not incredibly wise yet. So what we can use is very advanced machine learning, where we can look at thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of individuals and see what commonalities exist over those hundreds of thousands of individuals, and then use those findings to make predictions on somebody. Let me give you a very brief example. Let's say we were a car dealership and we looked at what was the income, the family size, and the work situation of the last 5,000 people who bought cars from us. We would use machine learning to determine, well, this family size, this income, and this work situation are people who are most likely to buy cars. We could then screen every person who walks into our door from that point forward to find those who had those traits and only spend our time working with those people. Now, that's a weak example, Ray, but it gives the sense of what machine learning is. Machine learning lets us look at thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of past actions, see which ones resulted in a certain outcome, and then look for those traits when we move forward. That's what I mean when we're trying to find individuals who would benefit from the type of education and career development that we offer. We can use that tool. We can use machine learning to get the right message to the right person right when they're ready to make that decision. That's the power of machine learning. So much of what was called artificial intelligence today is actually advanced machine learning, but artificial intelligence is evolving very rapidly.
Yeah, we're not quite at the level of Asimov, and I'm a huge Isaac Asimov fan as well. It's great to hear the way you articulated that. I think that was a great example, and I'd love to draw from that to getting your final thoughts using your crystal ball from your vantage point. How do you envision the future of innovative professional education at Rensselaer at work? What future directions do you think you're going to be going in, or that it will need to go in the future to stay relevant to those new traditional learners?
Always am drawn back to the movie The Matrix. Do you remember that movie?
Of course.
Trinity is on the roof, and Trinity and Neo need to get away from the building. There's a helicopter. Trinity says, load me up with a Huey helicopter. And she gets the training immediately right when she needs it. And now she can pilot that helicopter. I'm sure you remember that scene. It was just mind-blowing at the time. That's where education is needing to go, professional education. And I don't mean it in that sense. We're not there yet. But in that sense of, I'm at this moment in my life. I'm at this career step. My boss wants me to be able to manage a project, for example. I don't know how to manage a project. You can get that education right then, right there, use it immediately. It counts if you want to go back and get more later. But the more we're able to disaggregate the formerly common denomination of education, degrees, the more we're able to disaggregate it and make it accessible and available anytime, anywhere, so that people can get it as they need it. That's the future, I believe. That's where we need to go. The other side of that is, for too long, it's my opinion, that education has focused too much on the memorization aspect of education. In the professional world, companies are demanding, in fact, this is why they've been growing their own universities, because they weren't getting this from traditional education. They're demanding ROI. They want their people to be able to do something as a result of their education. So that's why I believe that the more applied we can make it, the higher order ability sets we can build, that the more we can make education available at the moment and place it's needed, that's how we will evolve. Technology can help us do that, but we have to attitudinally decide that it's important that we're able to help people build and become their fullest people, their fullest self, their fullest capability.
Totally fascinating. And thanks for sharing your insights, Dr. Aric Krause, Dean of Academic and Administrative Affairs at Rensselaer at Work. Really appreciate having you here.
The Mastering the Next podcast is a part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help higher ed marketers and admissions professionals find their next big idea and feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Artis Cadieux, J.C. Bonilla, Mallory Wilsey, Brendan Henkel, Brian Gross, and so many other of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.